All right, guys, we are here today with one of my favorite people in the world, becoming one of my oldest friends. I think we've known each other maybe
Yeah,
10 years now, I think. Um,
yeah, it's over 10 now.
yeah. But David Melladew has practiced Chinese medicine for over a decade and studied the practice for 25 years in Chinese philosophy, Chinese medicine. I guess there's so many modalities that are all linked. But this is one of the first times I think I'm chatting to you from America, because he's normally traveling the world, running wellness centers in the most exclusive resorts on the planet, and obviously teaching a lot of this and practicing a lot of this stuff. So thanks a lot for joining us and sharing your wisdom of the Tao, I guess we'll call this episode.
Yes, yeah, no problem. Always a pleasure.
No, always good to chat. I think we've chatted in America, Mexico. We've seen each other in China, Bali.
All
Now,
right, we did a nice talk in China. I think that was the last talk. Yeah.
that's cool. Yeah. Now we just need to get this madness to end and get you out to Australia and
Yeah, I'm always down. I'm always down for that.
All right.
Yeah, we've had this conversation many times. We've talked a lot about this already. It's good to do it again.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I was probably first introduced, when I think about how did I get into the Tao or Taoism or Chinese philosophy, it was probably the seed was planted probably 10 years ago when we met and we just chat and have these philosophical conversations over the last 10 years. And then for whatever reason, it was my time probably earlier this year to go, hey, oh my God, this is what I want to study for the next, decade or so. So I guess first question for people, we talk about flow and people hear the word Tao or Taoism. To try and simplify it for people, what is Taoism? What to you? How would you describe it?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, this is like the $1,000,000 question in the conversation, but probably the most difficult to answer. And it's been answered a million different ways. But I mean, one thing is kind of helpful is understanding even the literal translation of the Tao or Tao. So if you look at the written characters of the Tao, it's made up of two radicals. One that means to walk or to move, and one means like the head or beginning. And together it basically means the way or the path.
Yeah.
So that's one way, and that's the very literal, but it does apply to the description for sure, because part of understanding Taoism is understanding that it's a path to be walked, sort of. It's a way of doing things. And that's how you hear it referenced a lot. Like you'll often hear things like the Tao of this, or the Tao of bowling, or the Tao of sewing, or whatever. It does. I mean, what does that mean? It just means that you're applying Taoist principles to a particular activity, whatever that is. And as we just talked a little bit before, once you understand some of the ideas of Taoism, it really is universal. It can be applied to just about anything. And Taoism, of course, in its history, is just born out of the indigenous cultures of China. There's no real set date. It was accumulated knowledge that built up over millennia. And then it became kind of really prevalent in a time called the Warring States period in China, which is about 600-ish, 400 BC. So a long time ago. And then the founder is a gentleman you always hear talked about, his name is Lao Tzu. We mentioned before, which literally just means old man or old wise man. And he put together the Tao Te Ching, or supposedly put together the Tao Te Ching. And this is the Bible, so to speak, of Taoism. But really, it's very simple. That's one of the key principles of Taoism. But even understanding Taoism, it sounds very simple in the description, but of course it's all about how you apply it in the practice. So it was an observation of nature. So Taoism basically is born of a lot of people over many, many generations observing nature, the flow of things, how things evolved, were born, grew, died, and just that whole sort of all the natural phenomena that was going on around them. And they tried to understand patterns. They tried to understand how it all worked and how things were similar and how they could use that to their benefit. So Taoism is basically that. It's a philosophy of how to come into harmony with the powers that surround you, or the natural flow of things.
Yeah. So would you say the way is, in a way, the way of nature, the way of the universe, and to do things with that way?
Yeah.
Would that be the best description?
Yeah, exactly. When they say the way, it means the way, which is, in capitals, meaning the best possible way to flow with the powers that be, the way things work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and one of the key principles is harmony comes from following the way as opposed to swimming upstream or fighting against it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. I think, as I said to you before this call, like I'm starting to, when I face different scenarios in my life, I'm going back and tapping in, going, righto, well, what is the way? And then you're like, well, what is the way? Let's follow nature. And I think one of my favorite, this might be interpretation of the verse, might not be the exact verse, but it says, this applies to me the most. It says, nature is effortless and doesn't rush, but it achieves everything.
Yes.
For me, that is the greatest bit of wisdom that could ever imply. Because I'm someone that wakes up and, like, if it's 6:30 and I want to be out the house by 6:40 and you're running slow, I'm like itching the bits, and I'm pretty bloody annoyed.
Yes, right. Right.
And I don't want to be
might not be to your benefit. Right.
Yeah, and exactly. I don't want to be in that state of, it's like, that's not a good state to be. That's not in flow for sure. And if you talk in this program about being in flow state, that's not flow state, So, just that one bit of wisdom, watching the universe and go, hey, wow, the universe doesn't rush, and it does conquer everything. It does achieve everything. It's just such a beautiful way to look at things. What examples of the way have you been able to use practically in your life day to day? Like what are some small things where you follow the way as the wisdom of how to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think one sort of analogy, Taoism uses water as a reference point a lot. You hear it talked about. It's often called the water course way. We mentioned that book by Alan Watts, because they felt Taoists observed water a lot, and they got a lot of answers from it, and they felt that it was the closest representation of how the Tao works. So you use that a lot as a reference point, and I often think of moving through life similar in the sense of like being on a raft coming down a river, because Taoism, a lot of times when you think of like going with the flow and all this stuff, sometimes that can imply being very passive. Right. Just laying back and not being active. But as you said, in Taoism, everything gets done, which implies there is action. It's just in its due course. So if you're navigating a river going downstream, this is an active process, right? However, you are in a lot of ways at the mercy of the flow of the river. Now, you could try to turn around and swim against the current, and you might even succeed, but obviously there's going to be tremendous effort, and it most likely is not going to end in a great percentage of success. And then on the other side, if you turn around and go with things, it's not as simple as just being splashed about by the flow of the river. You do have to navigate it, and that requires tremendous awareness and sensitivity, so you understand and feel how things are moving and where your best course is. So you're not exactly fighting against it, but at the same time, you're also active in the process of kind of guiding yourself through it. So if you're going to use it like in your day-to-day life, it's always a moment-to-moment thing where you're kind of feeling the day, feeling how things are flowing in that day, and whether it's a day of rest or whether it's a day of activity, or whether I should lay back or whether I should push ahead. And that comes to another point where we can talk about, which is sensitivity and why that's such a big part of being Taoist. But I mean, that's how it helps me. It just helps me to think of that analogy no matter what I'm doing, and just kind of try to read the situation. Do I push ahead? Do I lay back? Should I conserve energy, or is now my time to run like mad? And that's
I guess I think the only challenge I see with that, going with the flow and downstream, is I feel like sometimes the universe will throw you lessons, and it'll go, hey, are you learning that? And that we might fall into the trap of thinking that's a way, but it's a bit of a test. So that for me, that's the kind of the only battle I've found in the philosophy of flow. And then for me, I guess my philosophy has just been, well, you've got to observe and go, hey, has the water been down that path before and it goes down to the muddy swamp? Well, that's when, as you said, you kind of navigate and shift. So that's how I'm trying to, I guess, fight that paradox in a way.
Well, that's it. That's where sensitivity comes in. So if you want to talk about, I mean, we're gonna talk about a lot of things that sound very like vague, right, or almost kind of out there. But to really give it a practical sense, you can say, okay, well, what is exactly this flow that you're talking about? What is it exactly you're feeling? And this is kind of a super key component of Taoism, which also, by the way, is part of the foundation of like Zen Buddhism and things like that as well. And in order to know what the flow is or what it is you're actually trying to follow requires tremendous amount of awareness. Yeah. And that comes from a tremendous amount of sensitivity. And sensitivity and awareness comes from practice. Sure. Comes from, I mean, in the most basic sense, things like meditation, and why meditation is the root of being a practicing Taoist. Yeah. Because what you're doing is you're cultivating sensitivity to feel the thing that you can't quite describe. So the first line in the Tao Te Ching is the Tao that can be named is not the Tao, yeah. Right? And basically, I mean, there's a lot of ways to interpret that in the way they look at it. But one clear way to me is that talking about it is not the thing. And so if we talk about what is this flow, yeah, that's fine. It's helpful. It's going to give us some direction. But to really know what a state of balance is, or the flow state as what you're kind of going into, that's something that has to be felt directly. Yeah. And it feels right, so to speak, in quotation. It feels correct. But in order to feel that comes from cultivation of sensitivity and past experience, right? So like you said, you know what certain things feel like, and you're like, I know where that's going. Yeah. But that only comes through awareness, learning from, making a mental note about what something feels like. That comes from the awareness you're cultivating, right? So certain people make the same mistakes over and over and over again, and they still fail to recognize the feeling behind that mistake, and it's like, ooh. Yeah. So just a quick example of that for me, something that's hard to describe, but is very clear feeling to me. When I was younger, a lot of times when I would try to impress people, like girls and stuff like that, I would do something like very like show off, or really try to and it always resulted in disaster. Yeah. Like even as a little kid, I was trying to show off in front of these girls on my bicycle. I got hit by a car. Yeah. Which explains a lot of things. But what I realized is there was a certain feeling, actually, and I could feel it in my gut when I was being too ego-y, too like that showing off thing. Yeah. It actually created a feeling in me. And that feeling always led to bad things. And now I'm very super aware of that feeling when I'm doing something and I feel that thing. I'm like, oh, that's not going a good place. Yeah. I'm out of balance. My ego's too strong. My sense of self is coming to the front too much, and I feel it, and it doesn't feel good. And that to me is an example of that, like that balance point where you're like, yeah, I'm going off line here.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, that's helped me a lot, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think one of the other things I like about the ego and is, the sun gives light to everyone and asks for no praise, and that really changed the way I do things. It's like, hey, are you just doing things for the goodness of your nature and their nature, or are you needing me, look what I did? And this is sort of a random question. I believe, this is going a bit more mystical, I believe that when you do start to live more in line with the Tao and start to maybe even teach or promote it and educate others on it, I believe there's some crazy synchronicities seem to just pop up. Like, and I know Wayne Dyer in his book on his interpretations of the Tao Te Ching just said when he started writing, something took over and and I sort of had the same thing when writing a book. I didn't mean to write the book. I didn't even really mean to talk about Eastern philosophy too much. It kind of happened, organically. But is there a belief in the Tao Te Ching that talks about this mysticism and this luck or synchronicities or this oneness? And
Yeah.
Is that something that comes up a lot?
Yeah, I mean, that is one of the essential ideas. The good thing is the way they describe it is not, they don't describe it as being necessarily mystical or being a mystery, in the sense of when you find the Tao, or when you feel this, let's say, correct movement, things just happen in accord. Like you said, they just happen, seemingly spontaneously. But if you're feeling it, you're not surprised by them. You're not seeking those synchronicities. You're not seeking those sort of fortuitous events. They just are they're just a byproduct of following the Tao. And that's actually a key component of following the Tao. There's a huge importance put on humility. Yeah. Because without that, you are clouded. Your sensitivity, like I just was saying about when my ego gets too strong, it clouds my feeling of the Tao, and that leads to bad things. So yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a key thing, that when you follow the Tao, crazy stuff happens, but it doesn't seem so crazy anymore. And you're not, and it's a hard balance to maintain, but you truly can't expect it, or don't, or shouldn't expect it, but it does absolutely happen, for sure. And it's cool because when you view it that way, number one, you're very grateful, because you understand it is almost like magic. And so then you're very grateful. Also, it does keep you humble, because you realize that it's not really a product necessarily of your doing. So it has some nice, but it's definitely a key part, for sure.
Yeah. So how else do we embrace and live with the Tao? I think, we've talked a little bit about trying to be like nature, being like water, being adaptive, and being able to shift and redirect that ship when you are going with the flow. And then you also said humility, I think, is obviously a big part of
humility.
Yeah. What else can we do to really live in line with the Tao? Obviously, compassion. What other, obviously compassion's very big part, I think, of his writings or the writings. What else could you suggest to really embrace that living with in line with?
Well, staying in line with the philosophy itself is, I really think it's quite simple.
Yeah.
And that really comes down to cultivating sensitivity and compassion and humility, and all those things are almost byproducts of that sensitivity. You almost don't even have to work at it, because, like I said, when you feel it, it just kind of goes that way. So in the most practical sense, you really have to work on meditation.
Yeah.
Quieting the internal dialogue, learning how. There's so much talk about meditation and what it is and all the different types of meditation. And I don't want to take away from any other versions of meditation, but in the sense of Taoism, meditation serves one purpose, and that is to bring you into alignment with the Tao, is to make you sensitive to the Tao, so that you can feel it, so you can act accordingly. And in order to do that in your meditation practice, the main task at hand to do that is to at least quiet temporarily that constant chatter that goes on, that defines you as separate from everything else, right? And if you work on that, it's a boring, difficult, mundane task, but the results are fantastical. Like you said, they're somewhat mystical in a way. So you get into your practices. Why also I like Zen meditation, because they're along this lines as well. Very simple practice. And you just do it. And that the more you do that, the more you'll cultivate that sensitivity and awareness, and the more you'll be able to feel that thing that's indescribable. Without that, you're going to go around in circles. If you approach it purely philosophically as an exercise of your mind, you're never going to get there, because again, the name that can be named is not the name. That it won't get you there.
Yeah.
So that's the first, I would say that's the single most important thing, is cultivate your sensitivity primarily through quieting the mind. And then this is why it's such a big part of practices like Tai Chi and Qigong, because Tai Chi and Qigong essentially are moving meditations.
Yeah.
They bring another aspect to your practice, but they're trying to accomplish the same thing. So when you're doing Tai Chi, a big part of what you're doing is cultivating sensitivity.
Yeah.
Now, if you're using it as a martial art or within that context, you're becoming sensitive to your opponent, right? So the more sensitive you can feel your opponent, you know what to do. Same as I said, when you can feel your opponent, you know if I need to retreat or if I need to press forward.
Yeah.
And that decision is based on your sensitivity of what your opponent's doing. But that skill that you're learning when you're doing Tai Chi, that sensitivity you're developing, that can be applied beyond, dealing with an opponent or something like that. It can be applied just to everything, life in general.
Yeah. So
those practices.
in our workouts that we do with the flow state method, we don't do Tai Chi or Qigong specifically, but I do try in a lot of the stretches to just slow down and open. And I feel like you just build this amazing flow or energy.
Yeah.
Like it feels really fucking good. I don't know what it is, but when you're
it's for sure.
It's almost euphoric. And I do believe you're gaining sensitivity even on a fitness component, is you're gaining more awareness of your every square inch of your body. You're improving your movement, which means when you land, now you're feeling every toe and you almost feel that transfer of weight into the energy so you can push off. So I think it's a mystical, magical thing.
And you got to remember that we don't really make a separation between the physical and the mental and all that stuff. So if you're cultivating physical sensitivity, this full body awareness, like you said, in these details, and becoming sensitive to your own body, that sensitivity can be applied outward as well. So it's not, developing physical sensitivity and mental sensitivity. We don't really separate those things as being different, and they can apply. So the more you become aware and tuned into your own body, the more you can then become tuned into the environment around you. So it's not, and this is one of those things you have to remember too, with things like meditation or yoga. They talk about going inward, right, and becoming sensitive to the inside. And that's true, but it's only half the picture. You're actually simultaneously becoming more aware of the inner nature and universe, and at the same time also becoming more aware of the external universe, which is the nature around you, the other people around you, and everything. It's happening simultaneously.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're doing both.
And now we're talking a little bit about movement, and I guess we'll tap into the traditional flow state, which I call the Michael Jordan buzzer beater, or his the way he moves with his effort. Would you say that what they talk about in the Tao Te Ching, Wu Wei, being effortless action, or what do they call it, actionless action? I feel like that's the zone. Like we're talking about this psychological state. It's kind of this Wu Wei Taoist philosophy. How would you describe Wu Wei? How can we embrace this effortless action into everything we do, not just sporting or whatever it may be?
Yeah, this is the trying not to try sort of thing, or that's exactly, that flow state is a glimpse of that state for sure, which is complete awareness, or as at that moment your peak awareness that you're capable of, peak sensitivity. And that peak awareness leads to peak function. Yeah. And the reason you're able to accomplish that peak awareness is because you have this moment where the internal dialogue has stopped, right? So when you're doing whatever it is, downhill skiing, whatever it is, the dialogue has gotten out of the way, right? And now you're just consciousness. Now you're just awareness without thought, which is a thing. And that's what you're after. A big part of what you're after in meditation is awareness without thought, right? So now you're aware without thought, which allows your perception to be amplified. Yeah. When the dialogue gets out of the way, that allows you to hit your peak potential of awareness. And that's going to be different for everybody, right? And the more you cultivate it, the more that will excel. So the higher level athletes, they've conditioned their body. So when the mind gets out of the way, they can hit their peak performance. And again, just as I said, it's not just being ultra aware internally of what their body's doing and control their body, but they're also simultaneously becoming ultra aware of the external environments, right? The other team, the other players, the ball, the net, whatever you're doing at the moment. So there's this perfect moment where the wall between you and the outside breaks down, and that's mostly from the quieting of the mind. And you're riding almost on a wave that's not you. It's more than you.
Yeah.
I always I'm not a big surfer, but I have surfed, but I can see it's super valuable in understanding this concept, which is, when you catch a wave, there's that sweet spot, right? There's a sweet spot where you're not too in front of the wave, you're not too behind it, where the wave just picks you up and carries you. That feeling almost like, there it is. It's right there. And then it just takes you, right? And in that moment, you're riding on some external force, but it's not just the external force. Yeah, you're not just being, like I said, you're not passive in the process. You're not just being tumbled around and being thrown by the wave. You're riding it. So there's this perfect synergy between the sweet spot and you on the external, and then everything happening right on the internal. And that's the reason why it's most noticeable in this context of like flow state with athletes and things like that, is that when you amp up stimulation or you put yourself in high pressure situations, it's easier for the mind to be shut down in that state. It's like all that's happening almost overwhelms the internal dialogue, and it just gets blown out. And for the people that practice, they're able to take advantage of that, and then they just get on that sweet spot and they ride it.
Yeah, in studying a lot of athletes and actually a couple of surfers, you can look at Mick Fanning's story, Kelly Slater's story before he went on his second run of winning world titles. And it's pretty much all athletes' story. They go through this period of being very in their heads, the pressure from the media, sponsors, their own expectations. I've got to be number one. I've got to win at all costs. And they don't perform well. And they almost send themselves into this downhill spiral. And then they all get, these guys get to this point where like, and Kelly Slater and Mick Fanning both say it, like, fuck it, I'm not even enjoying this anymore. I'm just going out and have fun. And then boom, they let go. The results just, something unleashes. And there's some magic in letting go. And I think, did you watch the Michael Jordan documentary on?
I did, yeah, I did. It's awesome.
He's let go. Like, he's before the game. He's dancing. He's smiling. He's loose, and everyone else is phones in, and they're very, very tense. So there's this. How would you link that letting go to Wu Wei and the Wei? Because I feel like they're one with each other.
Yeah, because if you say letting go, what are you letting go of? Well, you're letting go of the internal dialogue. You're letting go of, number one, this sense of self and all the things that are wrapped up in defining that. I'm a superstar. I need to perform. I have all these expectations put on me. I have expectations of myself. There's this whole story that you've created. You and the people around you have created, and you're holding on to that, right? That's the internal dialogue. That's a deep story that you've told yourself. And letting go means you're letting go of that. You're letting go of the story that you've created in your mind about yourself and what should and what shouldn't be. And when you let go of all that, you become sensitive. You can let everything happen organically. It's like getting out of the way of springtime. You know what I mean? It's like, the seasons change in their natural accord. They happen of their own, there's like a thing. So just let it happen. When if you're an athlete, you've trained really hard, right? You've done your drills over and over and over again. So they become automatic. You don't have to think about them. You've put in the work. Once you've put in the work, then that's the time where you can just let go of that thing and just let it take its natural course. Let your body do what it needs to do. Let your natural talent do what it knows how to do. Don't get in the way.
I guess something I discovered in this whole process of flow state, my fitness, living life, is when I explain what is this living in flow state, I really break it down to two things. It's letting go, and it's letting go of what you just said, the tension, the mind, the overthinking, the judgment, and maybe most importantly, the ego, which is probably creating all of those. But then it's
That's
all
the foundation of it. Yeah.
and then it's about letting go and getting the charge. What charge? Well, the Tao, wisdom, the energy, this magic that comes through us, but also it's probably that energy that comes through music, dance, Tai Chi, yoga, kind of what I was talking about. And for me, that's what I tapped into intuitively. That's what flow state's about. It's letting go. And it's also letting go of trauma, tension, stress, blame, all the things that we hold on to. And I kind of see society as these rigid, stuck in their head, egotistical, judging, being judged people that are living in a living hell. And there's no wonder those cells turn cancerous and disease. And it's not until we dump that, let go, and to tap into something higher, maybe it is the Tao, that we release this effortlessness. And yeah, we're not, maybe not, Michael Jordan, but we're going through this same joy and effortlessness and maybe the Wu way in life. So I really see the links. Like that's how I guess I'm seeing it. Would the Tao somewhat, is that a very in line with the
Yeah, because that's very in line with that whole concept that we just talked about, which is the ego being the main barrier, that internal dialogue being the main barrier. When I say ego, I mean it in the Eastern sense, not just ego like what we think in the West. Ego in the East means everything that you use to define who you are, both positive and negative. Ego isn't just about, oh, I'm so great. Ego is all the negative things you talk about yourself as well. It's your sense of self as something separate from everything else. So yeah, getting rid of that is a key component across the board. And that is a main aspect of Taoism for sure. You have to be humble. You have to crush the ego in order to become really sensitive to it. And again, it's not a passive process. All these people that find the flow state or those moments, that comes from tremendous work. Exactly. And then the letting go, right? So this is a key thing when you get deeper into Taoism, when it goes into things like yin and yang and yin yang theory and all the other stuff. You understand that it's movement comes from the interplay of opposites, right? Tension, relaxation. All movement comes from this pulsing, right? This contraction, relaxation, contraction, relaxation. And when you're trying to, let's say, go with the flow or feel the flow, it's an interplay between contraction and relaxation. So there's letting go, but that's we would say the yin side of it. But the yang side of it is all the work that you put in to allow yourself to let go, to allow all the potential to flow, so it's this interplay. So this is another thing that's important when you're doing meditation or Tai Chi or yoga or any of that stuff. You're creating, so say you're doing meditation, you think that this is just a very passive activity, right? You're just sitting there. But actually what you're doing, there's a tremendous amount of, for lack of a better word, tension when you're doing meditation, which means it's important to hold correct posture and correct alignment. You're sitting upright, you're holding a hand posture, you're breathing. There's actually a lot of structure to meditation for a reason. That's why I'm not a huge fan of like lying in bed doing meditation or whatever. It's okay, but that's not meditation. That's more relaxation, which is great. If you need to do that, do it. But real meditation and real Qigong and Tai Chi is holding those two opposing states simultaneously. Yep. So there's a lot of structure to meditation. There's all this to it, but then you're completely relaxed in it. This is the same exact thing when you're looking at high-level athletes, right? Talking about Michael Jordan or whatever. When they're in, fighters are the perfect example of this. When you're fighting, nothing's going to make you want to tense up more than being in a fight. But good athletes, top performers, they look effortless. They look relaxed and smooth. But I'll tell you, they're powerful. Tremendous power comes from that relaxation. And this is the classic thing of Bruce Lee talks about all that stuff. With water, it's, yes, flow like water, but water is deceptively powerful. And that comes through holding, when you're doing these type of exercises, whatever it is, you're trying to hold those two states. It's not complete relaxation, and it's certainly not tension. Yeah. It's that balance point that you're looking for.
Yeah. And what do you think of Bruce Lee obviously was very heavily a student of Taoism.
Yeah, for sure.
And probably maybe most famously, water goes to the teacup, it becomes the teacup. But yeah, I think because I've studied as much as I can of Bruce Lee, I feel like there's not enough. I wish there was more documentation of it, but
yeah. I mean, the good thing is everything he's talking about is out there already. If you study if you study Taoism particularly, everything he's saying is almost, some of it's basically word for word coming out of the Tao Te Ching and Chuang Tzu's work and stuff like that. So it's, if you want more of it, there's plenty there. You just have to go past what he's talking about. Yeah. But that's all the stuff he's talking about.
And he brings a lot of the fitness element in, you find power in your softness and and like he was probably the inspiration for the workout. And I think one of his famous quotes is, super basic, but hey, if you're going to build muscle, then boy, you better train flexibility and speed,
Yeah.
So
it's back to trying to find the balance point between strength and flexibility, passiveness and aggressiveness. How do you hold those two things? And exercise is no different. It's, if you want optimum health, you're trying to, you need both. You can't have just power. I mean, this is obvious. I mean, this is no knock on bodybuilding, but bodybuilders are not particularly healthy people, because they're heavily emphasizing one aspect of things. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just, if you're trying to go down the path that we're talking about, it's going to be difficult to get there in that approach. Just like I'm not a huge fan of people when I see them doing Tai Chi, and they're just kind of like waving their arms around. There's nothing there. There's no power there. You can see it. There's no structure. There's no power. They're just doing complete relaxation. And again, that's not a judgment. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what it was meant to do, actually. It's not meant to just teach you relaxation.
Yeah, so I guess I probably should chat to you this off the recording, but it'll be good to just get your view while the listeners are on. So one of my future visions, I guess, of flow state is to do multiple versions. This flow state is probably quite an athletic one. There's lots of sprint work, there's weights, there's a bit of sculpting, there's mobility, all the above. I believe this Tai Chi Qigong stuff needs to be brought to the West. However, I know you're not going to get any of my 30-year-old buddies in the park doing these for an hour.
Yeah.
It ain't going to happen.
Yeah.
So what I want to do, and I've already been speaking to some different talents from the dance space, and they do a lot of parkour and stuff. I was like, I want to kind of blend together a workout that blends together almost mobility, yoga, kung fu, martial arts, qigong. So you kind of traditionally doing qigong or Tai Chi, but somehow almost bringing those same powers and a lot of the benefits into mobility, yoga, and maybe into martial arts type of workout flow, like maybe going slow, Tai Chi, strike, that thing. Do you think that'll be effective? Like, how do you, maybe that's something we can work on in coming years?
Yeah, I mean, when I moved to San Diego, I got into Bagua, right? Kung Fu. Now, I'm not making a commentary about Kung Fu as a self-defense fighting style. That's not what I'm talking about. The reason I got into it was not so I could kick people's asses. The reason I got into it is because I wanted to utilize the key principles of Tai Chi, but I was still in my early 30s. I wasn't ready to just do this, which that was part of it, actually, but it allowed me to still train the same principles, but keep a certain amount of rigor to it that fit more to my age. And this is a key component of Chinese medicine, which is based on these Taoist principles, which is everything has its season, right? And I think we've talked about this as well. What you train as a teenager, what you train in your 20s, what you train in your 30s, what you train in your 40s should look different. If you're doing the same type of exercise routine in your 30s that you did in your 20s or in your 50s, you're not being optimum healthy. That's for sure, because your body, like everything, changes, and they look at that like the seasons. You don't plant seeds in the fall. You don't harvest the crops in the beginning of summer. It's just everything has its season, and so the amount of let's say, if you, again, using yin-yang principle, if you view exercises as being on a spectrum between yin and yang, yin being meditation, complete stillness, yang being things like powerlifting or sprinting, like 100-meter dash. You as you age, you're going to shift where you are in that spectrum. So as you get older, you're going to do things more yin to maintain health balance. When you're young, you have tremendous amount of yang. You have to burn that. If you're just doing meditation in your 20s, you're probably going to, there's a good chance you're going to have issues, especially without real strict instruction and teachers. Just like if you get older and you start doing powerlifting in your 50s and you're not highly trained or taught by someone who's highly trained, you're going to have a lot of problems. So so in your routine, I think a good way that you can introduce some of the Tai Chi principles to younger people is, one, yoga embraces these same things. And this is often overlooked in the West because yoga has become kind of athletic almost. When you're holding a posture in yoga, you are trying to relax in that posture as much as possible. So just like in meditation, you're trying to hold the perfect structure. You're trying to keep posture and structure perfect, breathing, but at the same time, you're trying to let go of all the tension that you're creating from the posture. And that's that practice of the two. So if you do things like flowing type yoga, and you do them with that understanding of, you're doing this not just as a rigorous activity, but I'm doing it to learn how to be soft in the middle of activity, you can take it that way. And I would say also for your younger friends, they still have to do meditation. They still have to do some stillness.
Oh yeah, it's probably symbolized like the yin and yang's got the little dot in both, doesn't it? Is it?
Exactly. There always has to be a drop of yin within yang or yang within yin. For sure, in your routine, it's the same thing. Even when you're in your 20s, you need something to balance that yang, or it gets, as you've seen, I'm sure, many times.
Right. I also love the philosophy of the whole living in your true nature and trying to figure out, well, what is my true nature versus what is my ego? What do you find the best way to do that? Is it just that sensitivity and really digging deep and coming to calm and gaining sensitivity?
Yeah, I mean, that comes from cultivating awareness, right? Which is sensitivity, all those things. Becoming aware of yourself. So the more you can slow down and quiet your mind, even periodically throughout the day, the more it will give you moments of reflection of your own habits and way of acting and responses. And so I forget who talked about it, but I've always found it useful, is meditation creates gaps between a stimulation and your response to the stimulation. It gives you this little moment of pause where you have a little bit of time to assess the situation more clearly before you react to it, right? So the more you develop that, the more you actually become aware of your own mental patterns, and how you react to things, and how, your habits, like I said, and all that stuff. So yeah, understanding yourself comes from, again, cultivation of sensitivity and awareness.
Yeah.
And then, listen, all these things can be helped by people on the outside, professionals that can kind of guide you as well. That's why the role of the teacher comes in.
Yeah. And what I found when trying to find my true self or true nature of who I am, when you are in silence and then you just go into that effortless action and just take some action, that's when that inspiration and creativity come out of me. And then obviously in the life cycle part, at this time in my life, like, I've got a lot of vigor. I've got a lot of yang that just builds up in this body. So I've got to explain to like partners, I'm like, hey, I need to express this. I've got to surf or go to the gym or do something.
Yeah.
It's just like, I can't help it. That's this is the true nature for now.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, knowing that and expressing that is key, because you're not making excuses for your actions. You're being true to what you feel. Like, you just like that. This is just needs to be expressed. I have to have an outlet for it. Yeah. And to suppress that's only going to cause problems. And that's a perfect example of sort of using Taoism as a guiding force. It's like, yeah, you don't need to suppress that. There's no real reason to suppress it. You have to use it.
So on the topic of expression of self, I know Bruce Lee is very, very heavily on, you know, getting to a point where you can live an expression of your true self. What does that mean to you when talking about Taoism?
Yeah, I mean, it comes back to the same thing. You're kind of holding somewhat contradictory ideas. So when it comes to expressing yourself or finding your true self and then acting accordingly, first of all, that's an ongoing process. That's like ever evolving thing that I don't know if that ever really ends, but at a strategy, that doesn't mean that you just do whatever the hell you want because you feel like it. That's not the same thing. Again, there's this sweet spot that's impossible to say, there it is. You can feel it. Like I said before, when I was talking about me doing things ego-y or showing off, that was a feeling, that I recognized and became more and more sensitive to it. So now I feel that feeling when I do ego-y things that are much smaller. Before, I used to have to do these big things that were obviously ego-y for me to recognize it. And that just became more, I just noticed it, and now I'm more and more aware of it, right? So living in your true nature is an ongoing process of becoming more and more aware of your patterns and what you need, what's healthy and what's not healthy. And again, you can't just say this is or this isn't healthy. You have to feel that. And it's an ongoing interactive process that you're just always working on.
So if you, there you go.
I was just going to say, and if you approach that process with humility, with good intentions, doesn't mean you're going to be successful, but it will give you a much better chance of success, or at least becoming more aware of your true nature. If you're doing it sincerely and honestly without ego, you'll have much better chance of success for sure.
So my observation of that, and something I've probably already been trying to do, is when you feel a need to do something. So let's just say someone's thinking of starting a business, or I want to go own a cafe down the road. Is it at that point you sort of sit there and go, well, am I trying to own a cafe because I want to impress everyone in town and give everyone a, free coffee and know it's my cafe? Or is that an expression of, I love coffee, I love mingling, I love people, is that kind of that meditative point where you got to stop and self-analyze?
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. And every person, that question, the answer is going to be slightly different, right? For some people, that it might be ego-y, and for others, it might be a true expression of themselves. And no one is going to be able to tell you that from the outside. That's something that only you're going to be able to find, that sweet spot of what is. So, like, for example, in my own life, my life has kind of evolved, things happen, and I kind of learned how to sort of follow what I believe to be the right course. And I've been very lucky that way. But there's been times where things seem to me to just be flowing naturally towards a certain outcome, and you're like, oh yeah, and boom, boom, boom. And then all of a sudden you hit this unexpected obstacle, and it's not meant to be. Yeah. And one of the hardest things is to decide how much effort to put into making it come true.
Yeah.
Right? So you're like, all right, I hit this obstacle. Now I don't want to just be a complete, like I said, passive participant where I just go, oh, well, I'm going to go this way now. But at the same time, like, how hard is too hard when it comes to trying to achieve something, right? And again, that sweet spot is something you can only come to through continually working on it. Right. I had to learn when, and I'm not saying I have learned, but you have to learn when to let it go or when to push forward. And this goes back to the idea of Tai Chi, push hands, and when to grasp, when to relax. And that spot is always moving and always changing. And it's different for you from one day to the next. Yeah. And all you can do is your best at trying to read it. And there's just, the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So you'll find that point where you're pushing, and you're just like, and you just let it go, and you just know it and you feel it. And it's like, okay, that's the right thing to do. Whereas I've had other times where I hit a certain obstacle, and just every cell in my body was like, nope, this is it. It just is. I don't know how to explain it. It just is the thing to do. Bali, for me, moving to Bali was one of those circumstances where that came up, and it just, everything in my body was like, this is the move for you. And I had to do a few things, and when it happened, it was so clearly the right thing. Yeah. So finding that, knowing when that's right and when it's not easy. And you can't define it. It only comes through sensitivity, for sure.
Because I guess that there's the challenge. I guess if you play devil's advocate, the challenge against Taoism is you could say there's some paradoxes. Well, do you go?
It's all paradox.
Yeah, it's all paradox. You know, do you go with the flow, and the minute it gets tough, I'm going to go with the flow. And I think that's what a lot of people do in business. They start 25 businesses, and the minute it gets tough, you know. So yeah, I think that's where we have to have, that's wisdom in the Tao, the wisdom of the.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's when you know you're doing it right, is when you keep hitting paradoxes. Yeah. When you keep hitting, when you're holding contradictory things, then you know, okay, I'm probably doing this correctly. That's the first thing. You're like, well, this doesn't make sense, but somehow it's working. Yeah. But that is the thing and why we talked before about Taoism being corrupted, so to speak, is it's not conducive to dogma. And dogma is a rule, right? It's rules saying that if A, do B. If B, do C, or whatever, right? And it tells you, okay, this is the right action at this right time. Now, that's a predetermined decision, right? They're saying this is the right thing to do always, or whatever, in this situation. And as you know, that's not reflective of reality. Every situation is unique. Every person is unique, and their relationship to a situation changes not only from person to person, but within your own life, right? And so that bullseye is ever moving. The Tao is always moving and shifting, or that balance point is always moving and shifting. Now, that sounds like a cop-out. Yeah. Like, well, then how do you, again, this is where you get into practice versus theory. It works in practice. You have to do it. You have to experience it. You have to kind of live it to know it. And for me, at the end of the day, even if the whole thing is bullshit, dare I say, it's no more bullshit than anything else out there. Exactly right. So that's for sure. So yeah, again, but that's what I love about it. I love the fact that you can't write out a formula for success. It's not that, I don't find that to be the reality of the way things work anyways. There is no universal.
People want to sell I want the 10 rules of life that will make me successful in any situation.
Yes.
I'll pay you for it. I'll pay you how much? 10 grand? Sure.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, well, yes, people love that. Everyone loves that because it's, I don't want to say it's easy, but at least it's clear. It's the waters aren't very muddy, right? But when you get into something like Taoism, it is muddy, and when you understand it, it's not so muddy. But again, that understanding only comes from direct experience, direct contact. It won't really be easily explained. And if you can do something successfully and it's not easily explained, I kind of think that's actually a good thing sometimes. Because again, you're talking about Michael Jordan, whatever his formula for success is obviously not going to have the same outcome for pretty much anybody else that applied it. They would have varying degrees of success with it. And if I wanted to learn how to be a good basketball player, he'd be the guy I'd go to. But whatever his formula is obviously only going to be partially applicable to me, you know? Yeah. And that's what I love about Taoism, and always have, is that once you understand the principles and you get engaged in the activity of trying to follow it, every person's formula is going to look different, you know, but you'll know it when they're on it. Yeah. Like I can see when people are on it, even if they don't know they're on it. You can see they're on it because of the way they have just the right amount of tension and just the right amount of relaxation.
Yeah, the sweet spot. And then, well, so we can't not talk about breath. I think I got introduced to breath while this whole thing come together, and arguably it's probably the most impactful, I think, because I believe, I know what I studied with a lot of Dan Brulé stuff. And what I like about him is he blends the science and spirituality, and he's talks beyond, yes, breath can change your CO2 levels and your, you know, or your central
autonomic nervous system.
Yeah, all that stuff. But, you know, what I've felt and what he's taught is that it's connecting you to spirit. It's connecting you to this life force, maybe the Tao better than anything. What's your experience and practice at the moment with breath? Because I know you're doing a lot of it.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably the single most, I mean, well, first of all, physiologically, it is the single most important thing you do. That's obviously in the most practical sense. But from any other sense, I think it's probably the single most important exercise that you can involve yourself in. And whatever you do, whatever your sport or whatever your activity is, that should be a key component of it. If you're a fighter, if you're a weightlifter, a breath is, you cannot ever separate the breath out, or shouldn't, from those type of activities. So it's absolutely essential no matter what. But there's so many layers to it, and it's no mistake that breathing is at the foundation of pretty much every spiritual practice in every tradition. It just is. I mean, whether it's yoga or Zen meditation, whatever, breath is paramount almost always. So there's definitely a lot of layers to it. And I think it has, because of all those layers, it's hard to figure out what's the main thing that's going on. But I don't think it's one thing. I think it's all these things happening. So obviously from the physiological level, it's going to have certain changes to your body, you know, like we talked about autonomic nervous system, these things. So it's going to put your body in the correct physical state to allow the mind to become quiet. Or it's going to put your body in the most conducive state to allow you to quiet your internal dialogue, right? So if you slow the heart rate down, you get your body super relaxed. This will allow your mind to get slow down as well and become more. So first of all, physically, it allows you to get into the state of mind you're trying to get in when you're doing meditation or any spiritual practice. So it helps you to start to develop sensitivity. And then it's also your intimate relationship with the world. You breathe the world in, you breathe yourself out. You breathe the world in. I mean, it's your intercourse with the world. I mean, in the truest sense of that word, it's like you're directly connecting to your environment through your breath. So you can think of that purely physically, or you can add more to it. And again, I don't think it's a mistake that the breath is the foundation of all these practices. And I suspect it's the foundation because it does allow you to get into the mental state that helps you then become sensitive to everything else. And when you start to meditate and you start to focus on your breathing and do all that stuff, the breath will actually follow the rhythm it needs to follow, right? It's one of those things, right? You don't have to think about your breathing. It happens automatically, or you can control it. But again, there's this sweet spot between when you're doing meditation, between where you're voluntarily controlling it, but you're also letting it go on its own. There's this weird balance point where you get on that perfect balance point, and it does do things to your mind and send you places and do cool stuff. So
what's the breath work you're playing with at the moment, and what's the desired outcome and results you're getting from it?
Well, as you know, the Wim Hof stuff has been very popular in the last few years, and I love it. I mean, it really helped me a lot to get past some barriers in the breathing I was doing already, because what I found was it actually brought a level of tension to my breathing that I didn't have. So we were talking about, you know, relaxation and tension. I felt like my breathing exercises up to that point were maybe too relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought a level of tension. However, the cool thing is, as I did the breathing more and more, I started to be able to combine it with my other breathing to make my other breathing techniques even more relaxed.
Yeah.
So it was this kind of interesting thing of like bringing tension into my breathing to then allow me to get even more relaxed, and that kind of playing off those two things. So one of the things I would do is after I do a round of his breathing where you do this really kind of strong breaths, right? Inhales, exhales, all that. Hold the breath. And when you're holding your breath and trying to relax and you're building up all this tension, and then I would let it go. And then I would just do the most silent, quiet, relaxed breaths I could for like another 30 seconds with almost like complete stillness and just total relaxation. And it really brought this cool contrast there. And then that would then amp up the next round I would do of his breathing. So again, just playing between tension and relaxation. And yeah, it really got me into deep, deep states of meditation and relaxation. Helped a lot. Yeah.
That's funny. I played with it. We do the Wim Hof breathing in one of the episodes, and I know Rhea and I,
Cool.
we just charge. And then in one of the other ones, we do the Zen breathing of, try imagining, the nostrils don't move on the in-breath or out-breath. You're so calm.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
And that's the fun thing. I sort of see breath as a bit of a game. It's like play with it, see where it goes. And again, your body's going to react differently. Like the 4-7-8 breath doesn't put me to sleep. It almost gives me a bit of energy, where a lot of people, it's the training to put you to sleep.
Yeah. Well, it's balancing out what you need.
Yeah.
That's any good practice, almost any good exercise or health practice is going to do that, right? It's going to give you what you need. If you need good sleep and you need to relax and let go of tension, it's going to do that. If you need energy and you're low on energy, it's going to give you energy, or, it's going to tone your body if your body's too weak, or it's going to relax your muscles if they're too stiff. It's going to do what you need.
If it affects the central nervous system so much, obviously all our central nervous systems are in a completely different North Pole to South Pole, sometimes different states. So obviously the breath's going to react differently to our individual state.
Yeah, I meit's if you use yin yang ideas around in Taoism and all that stuff, obviously the breath itself is yin and yang. It's both inhale, exhale. It's the interplay that, again, it's like one of the most primal dances of yin and yang in your body. But also within your body, you in the autonomic nervous system, you have the parasympathetic and you have the sympathetic, right? Parasympathetic is the rest, the relaxation. That's when all the body organs can function at their maximum, right? And then the sympathetic is when you're in the fight or flight. This is that emergency mode, right? Where the body needs to act and either fight off something or run away. But when you're in the sympathetic mode, everything else shuts down because all the energy is needed to get to the muscles and to get you the hell out of there. And so this, again, you can view this from a yin-yang principle. In the modern world, we're spending way too much time in the sympathetic. We're almost getting stuck in the sympathetic, right? So we're out of balance. There's too much yang within our nervous system, meaning that there's too much tension. We're in that stress mode. Breathing is the easiest way to shift your body consciously from the sympathetic to the parasympathetic. So when you control the breath, you can control things that your mind wouldn't consciously be able to access. So if I told you to slow your heart down, how are you going to do that consciously? Well, most people almost instinctively would start controlling their breath. They would start slowing the breathing down, try to relax, because really the only window you have to all these autonomic functions is through your breath. So I like the breath, like I said, because it affects the yin and yang idea in Chinese medicine a lot, both physically, mentally, in a lot of different ways. So it helps you balance the yin and yang of your nervous system, if you want to think of it that way.
Cool.
So,
all right. Well, it has been a pleasure as always. And yeah, I truly hope Corona ends within the next sort of 3 months. So this place is in a platform where, we can collaborate on a bunch of different things, whether that be over your way in New York. It's opposite to the life here in Coolangatta Beach where I'm at the moment, but I love the yang of of New York, and I'm pretty happy with the yin here at the moment. But no, thanks a lot. It's always a pleasure, and I'm very grateful to have you.
Well, now is the perfect time we're talking about Corona. Now is the perfect time to do your breathing exercises, because talk about strengthening your immune system, strengthening your respiratory system. This is the perfect time to get into breathing, because obviously for a lot of us, we have time that we don't normally have. We've got downtime we're not normally getting involved in. And if anything you can do that's going to help build your immune system and then also strengthen your lungs from a respiratory illness, breathing is going to be a big one, you know. So this is a perfect time for it. But yeah, my pleasure as always. I hope this was helpful.
Very, very. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon, mate.
Cool.